Welcome back to Hockey Pals, where we're pals and we're talking hockey, all things hockey, fantasy, real life, free agency, all the things. My name's Steve, and as always, joined by my dear co-host Sam. Say hello.
How's it going?
The Eagle has landed, or the Maple Leaf. The Beaver has landed.
Why did
He's coming home. He's coming home. He's back to Toronto.
He's making a mistake.
No, my first question for you is how many cups are they going to win?
They're going to win for his entire contract period, which is 7 years. So they're going to win 7 cups in a row.
7 cups?
Yeah.
Going
that's
in, that's all right, on the line. You know, everyone knows to win a Stanley Cup, you need a strong defense.
Yeah, they have the strongest. They
got the strongest.
Yeah.
Morgan Rielly, he's the beast that they'll ride to the finish line, right? He's
phenomenal.
The camel that they're all climbing on.
Yeah.
It's going to be good. It's going to be good. But I will say it's going to be a fun team to watch. Sure, there's no more JVR and there's no more Tyler Bozak, who we'll get to the two of them. Mm-hmm. But it basically comes down to, in order to afford them, they had to kind of let those guys walk. And now you have Mr. Tavares slipping in. So it's the upgrade from Mr. Bozak to Mr. Tavares. And you know, every team in the league would do that. Bozak's put in his time. He did his thing. Good player.
He dealt
good face
with
off
Toronto and the fans.
Sure,
yeah, you're right.
Sure. It's he gets to start the next chapter. And at least on the wing, they got a lot of young guys ready to step in, with Andreas Janssen and Kasperi Kapanen being primary winners of those opening spots. And then obviously you got your Zach Hyman and your Connor Brown, and it kind of comes down to these young guys that, a lot like Pittsburgh, you need these cheap players to be able to contribute on their ELC, or else you're done.
Yeah.
I haven't heard too much about Timothy Liljegren.
Yep.
I think that was last year.
They picked up and they were all very happy about him. Yeah.
I mean, he should be good, but again, defensemen taking a little longer. So they definitely have some troops, some cavalry on their way in with him. Travis Dermott was a big surprise from last year. And, you know, Jake Gardner, I think they kind of know what they have there. Him being, you know, not a perfect player, but what he does bring is kind of worth his downsides outside of some playoff shortfalls. But, you know, no player is perfect. So the defense is going to be young. They're released out from under Roman Polak, which I know a lot of Leafs fans are happy to kind of see that changing of the guard. He found a new zip code on his way over to Dallas, I think, for a pretty affordable contract. I'm a fan of people continuing to be employed in the NHL.
Even if
I
you're
don't
not
need to
very
be a
good
fan
at
of
your
them.
job, that's good.
Sure. And no, Dallas,
he's a good player. $1.3 million for 1 year. There's no risk.
Sure. He's just not your top 4 guy, and that's okay. Yeah. Dallas has enough of their young players coming in with Heiskanen, who's, you know, has all the makings of a stud defenseman, to join Esa Lindell, Klingberg, who, you know, is in a lot of Norris conversations, ton of points this year. Julius Honka, who's, you know, another former first-round pick who with a lot of offense. So they could use some snarl, so it can't hurt. That's Dallas. Dallas is boring. And you know why Dallas is boring is because they lost. They were in the running, but they didn't win the big fish.
Yep.
The whole enchilada of Canadian John. Were you surprised to see JT land in Toronto?
I was. So when they had when he was basically making his decision and he let it hit July 1st, basically the Islanders were taken out of the equation, and that's when it started becoming more of a possibility that he's going to go to Toronto. As soon as you go to free agency, the Islanders don't get the leg up on having an 8-year deal. So they get reduced down to 7 with everyone else. But I really thought he was going to go to the Sharks.
It was looking good. It was looking good for San Jose. I know apparently in the meetings, Evander Kane came in to sort of pitch him on it and be like, "Hey man, it's good. It's good for us down here. You can surf, you can do yoga. It's California. Have a good time."
He's going to regret it. 100%.
It couldn't compete with with nostalgia and sort of that hometown feel, right?
Yeah, but he's going to regret it. He doesn't understand. He's been with the Islanders where he could just suck and nobody cares. He just gets to do whatever he wants. But he's going to go to Toronto. He's going to mess up one time and they're going to crucify him. And he's going to be like, what the hell? Why did I come here?
So are you of the mindset that John Tavares is not that smart?
I'm in the mindset that John Tavares is like, oh, euphoric, Toronto. I grew up watching it. It's going to be crazy putting on the jersey. But that's going to fade after like a year or two.
Okay.
And then he's going to be like, what am I doing? Why did I do this? Like the
he
media is crazy and the fans are crazy.
He got suckered in by the dream.
Exactly. That is Toronto. They just sucker you in with the dream. Just like every year they're like, oh, we're going to be Stanley Cup champions. We have such a good team. And then they suck.
The word is that the Sharks offered more money.
Yeah.
I think the taxes are a little more forgiving in California versus Ontario. I've heard upwards of around like $13 million per year was what the Sharks kind of had on the table.
Whoa, that's a lot of money.
It's a lot of money, and opting to go for the $11 million
and he gets
per
paid
year.
Less.
Yeah,
due to
like
taxes.
after taxes.
Yeah, isn't it 30 of the whatever 72? What was the total?
So there's a cheat sheet where if it shows how much money he would actually take home when you account for Canadian taxes, state tax, federal tax, net salary, including escrow, all this kind of stuff. And if he had signed in California the exact same deal, so again, not more money, but the same deal, his take home for a $77 million contract would be $33.7 million.
Okay, that's in California.
That's in California. For the Maple Leafs, his take home is 31.6. So if he had signed the same deal in Toronto as he would have in San Jose, he's leaving just about $2 million on the table. And now you factor in the fact that he would have been making an extra couple million a year. That's what, let's say it's he's could have easily left another $10 million on the table by signing in Toronto.
Oh, Jesus.
When we're looking at the numbers, the take home pay is anywhere from for this deal in Toronto, $31.6 million, and in San Jose, let's just say he could have taken home $40 million. So what's the difference when you're that loaded?
$9 million is even for rich people, that's like a third of the Toronto contract. That's the difference. That's a third. That's a large amount. And
I guess if you think about just sending all that money to do good things in the world or build a hospital,
Yeah.
all those things. So
Hey,
what we're coming down to is that Tavares is just, he's greedy, he's entitled. He wants to play where he wants to play. Sure. That's what it comes down to. You don't want to build a hospital? Just all you have to do is play in California and have a good life.
Yeah, there you go. Just go to Toronto. Who wants to deal with Toronto winters?
No. Well, listen, here. We're going to put it on the line. Is he the most selfish player in NHL history?
Okay, obviously.
Is he a bad person?
Obviously he's not.
And since he is, how bad of a person is John Tavares?
He's not. That's not what I'm trying to get at. He's not a bad guy. He's actually. You obviously would argue that he's very honorable in the fact that he would go to his childhood team. He would take the pay cut basically, by taxes and so on, and not taking the $13 million a year in San Jose and then going to Toronto for 11. Those are all great reasons and what makes him like a good guy. And even when he was with the New York Islanders, he was. He seemed like a good guy. Like there was never anything that he did. He never really did any dirty plays that made people go, "Oh, John Tavares is like this or that." But it's just infuriating that he went to Toronto of all places.
So what's wrong with Toronto, Sam?
The fans.
Okay. So let me grant you that. Let's say the fans are a problem or annoying for us. Sure.
Everyone.
For everyone. Okay, let's say that's true. Now, not all fans are going to see eye to eye.
Of course.
Everyone's got people that are, that's why you're a fan of whoever you're a fan of, right? That's why Vancouver's home.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. Maybe it's just if Toronto fans I interact with, but they just seem so, I can't deal with when people can't just fairly assess value for another team or another player. Like
Welcome back to Toronto Watch. What is wrong with the fans? As our segment we bring on every week is why are Toronto fans the worst? Take it away, Sam.
Yeah, they just they don't know how to assess value. That's what it comes down to. They just think if you play in Toronto, you're just worth a certain amount and you're like that much better. There's no like looking at someone from like, let's say New York or something and just being like, hey, yeah, this is a great player and he's good or whatever. It always just seems like there's this like level of arrogance. Like they should just be handed a cup because they're Toronto.
Homerism.
Yes.
Yeah,
it's
being
the worst.
being a homer. What do you think it is? You probably watch more Canucks games than you watch of anything else. Am I right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so you're going to know more about them. You're going to think more highly of players that are doing good things, and you're probably going to be harder on players that are doing those boneheaded plays that you see every week, 3 times a week when you're watching them play. So
Absolutely.
I don't know. I think we could probably give Leaf fans a bit of a pass. Is it their fault that they're bad at knowing things?
No, and the funny thing is, though, I actually think the team, like, I know Lou Lamoriello's gone. Really like him as a GM, and now he's with the Islanders. But I really like Babcock. He was on Detroit, loved him there, and then now he's with Toronto. Great coach. Then you have just the Leafs lineup,
Shanahan,
really solid,
doing good things.
Yeah, Shanahan, great president. Like the lineup is good. I'm not hating on like the organization. It's just the fans make the organization look bad. Like they have a great roster.
I think being over on the West Coast, we're used to hearing about Toronto being sort of the whole hockey world, revolving around it. Probably just because of how many people come from Ontario and Toronto that are in the hockey biz. So that's part, and Canadian media being based there. So that's a lot of it. I guess we just hear a lot of it from where we are. There's a lot of that. Imagine if we were a fan of, if you were one of those Carolina fans or an Arizona fan, they're out there, and it's just a matter of, imagine how that feels. It's like getting always like, oh, are you guys still around? You're still a thing? Okay, cool. Or people like posting photos of like, oh, why don't Florida fans go to Panthers games? Huh, interesting. A bunch of empty seats, right? So I don't know.
No, you're absolutely right. It is what it is. But
divorcing the team from the fan base, I think you kind of have to. There's definitely, I mean, Vancouver is overrun with bandwagon fans. Which
they're the worst too.
Yeah,
they're just
which
as
we've
bad.
Which we've come to learn quite well since the team has kind of taken a nosedive and missed the playoffs and all that. So I would say they're just as bad, and that's kind of like Vancouver is pretty bandwagony, as I would say overall.
Yes.
Especially with all the corporate seats that are. That just nobody goes to, and like people who live in the city can barely afford to go to games. Like it does change the dynamic of it. I remember since living in LA with ticket prices being a lot more affordable and being able to go to Ducks games or Kings games. I'm talking to people from like Kings fans here from LA who are complaining about the ticket prices now in LA. And I'm like, it's since they started winning, prices have gone up. And I'm like, no, this is still great. Like, this is still real good. This is a bargain. Lower bowl, $60. Let's do this. But on paper, Toronto's a contender, I guess. It's just that their defense just needs to be good enough. They have a goalie. Anderson is solid, and they have just a dominant forward group, and I think they have enough defensemen to at least, like Riley can at least keep things moving, and Gardner's decent. Dermott hopefully if he gets better, like they're in pretty good shape. And you hear a lot of the comparisons of the Matthews Tavares 1-2 punch, comparing it a lot to Malkin and Crosby. Debate, we'll see. Let's talk about that 10 years from now and compare the two to see where they're at. But on their end, have they ever had a solid D-core in Pittsburgh? They had peak Brooks Orpik, who did his thing, and then Chris Letang, when he's not injured, has been great. But beyond that, it's sort of the salary cap era ends up forcing teams into not being able to be dominant in every position. That's just the nature of it. Mm-hmm. Switching gears to any other team, like how do you, without signing a Tavares, what's everyone else left to do? Because that's kind of the question that comes not only to the teams that were in the running and kind of in the presentation period, who felt that they had a shot as of last week, mm-hmm. or as of this weekend, hoping that Tavares would sign. 30 other teams in the NHL do not have a Tavares, and what do they do? They won't have the opportunity to sign one again. Like the next summer, the closest comparison would be Tyler Seguin. If he gets that far, mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
He would kind of be the closest thing to this. And I know Stamkos ended up sticking around in Tampa, so we never really got to see that big move. So assuming you don't get Seguin either, what do you do? You see, as far as teams being built, you got Nashville building from the net out, always having pretty solid goaltending with Rene holding it down, however old he's getting, just dominant defense. Their offense has been getting better and better every year. Or you go kind of the Capitals route. They just won with solid team defense and their defensive core delivering to the best of their ability, but they're not no one would argue that the Capitals have the best defensive core in the league.
No, you're right. They don't have one of the best defensive cores, but see, like you said, it's more of a committee on Washington, whereas the committee on Toronto, I'm just pointing them out because they won the John Tavares sweepstakes, is because I don't think their bottom six is as physical or defensively aware or skilled as the Washington.
You don't see Toronto being as defensively responsible overall as Washington?
Yeah, I can see them scoring as much as Washington. I would actually argue that Toronto would be better at scoring than Washington. Mm-hmm. And that's, you have Ovechkin, Kuznetsov, Backstrom, Oshie. As you go on through the playoffs, or you see the playoffs, there's hardworking defensive teams that just kind of work you over, kind of like what Vegas did. Like a great example of like offense doesn't win you games is Tampa. Mm-hmm. Like they just aren't good enough defensively, and they don't have the bodies to play that kind of like physical grinding game either.
Hey, are you listening to that, Victor Hedman? Getting called out, bro.
Victor Hedman is like the one guy that's like, okay, solid player, physical, but
Anton Strawman has been pretty good for them.
Yeah, Strawman's been good. Sergachev, when they got from
he's only getting better.
Yeah, got from Montreal, which I think was a steal. If you look at like the outcome, Drouin isn't doing too hot, and and it's what they needed. They were dealing from a position of strength, right? They were moving out forward depth for defensive depth, so it makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
And they have Ryan McDonough. I think Tampa, they're doing it the right way. They have Hedman, they have Sergachev on his way up. They made the big move to bring in McDonough, mm-hmm. and they have Strawman, and that's a solid top four. And I think if you have a top four that you can kind of get behind, that's the best you can do. You hope you do need decent 5-6 guys who can at least not be huge liabilities.
Yeah,
but I feel like Toronto could get there, but.
Yeah, I still feel like they're missing like one or two players.
It looks like Toronto is probably one or two defensemen away from being a perennial contender. And if we learned anything from the Capitals is, if you lose one or two playoff runs, you can't blow it up. I mean, there's always going to be changes from year to year just based off contracts expiring, but The Capitals are not one of them. They're going to keep everyone, and they're just going to do it again. That's kind of what we learned, with John Carlson deciding to stick around in DC, along with Michael Kempney sticking around. They're just holding pat. They're like, let's one more again.
Yeah.
As far as keeping this defensive talent and this defensive depth, you're seeing a lot fewer of these high-end defensemen even get to the UFA stage. I think it was Drew Doughty re-signing for 8 years at $11 million a pop. So him and JT with nearly matching contracts. Who would you take? Who do you want on your team? JT?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think you have to. It sort of depends on who you have. Who would you take on the Canucks?
Ooh. That's now you're asking me a tough question.
Yeah, now you have to think about it. Now you got to take it serious. So we're looking at Norris Trophy winning Drew Doughty at 8 years, $11 million apiece, or John Tavares, $7 million, or 7 years, $11 million apiece.
With our current prospects, I would say JT, because we have defensive prospects coming in.
Okay.
Otherwise, if we didn't have the defensemen that we had, prospects coming up, because that's what it comes down to, because we are missing a bona fide, number one defenseman, which would be Drew Doughty.
True.
We do have Bo Horvat, Baertschi, and Brock Besser, but then who do we have after that?
That's
Yeah. And so that's why it would be like, okay, well, you can bring JT in, and then you could stick, Pettersson or whoever next to him, and then they'll just light it up. One rumor apparently was that it's Chris Tanev for William Nylander, which and the reason is because Chris Tanev is on a very affordable $4.45 million a year, and William Nylander, you were mentioning earlier, is probably going to request somewhere around $7 million. You said is Ehlers' money.
I could see them getting him for just over $6 million a year, 6. Nick Ehlers in a similar position is $6 million a year.
Yeah. So if we could somehow miraculously get rid of Louis Eriksson, you could slot in that $6 million to William Nylander.
Sure, why not? Yeah, just take it all in. I think what Vancouver should do is just get all of the good players and put them on Vancouver, right? Because then we have all the good players.
No, I'm just saying the rumor was Chris Tanev for William Nylander.
That's true. I know that Leaf fans didn't want to take that rumor seriously. I think the idea was that that's what kind of the core of the deal would be built around. And when you see that Larson got traded straight up for Hall, anything's possible, but you'd have to think Vancouver would be throwing something else in, whether that's
just because there's a huge age difference.
Sure,
too.
Whether it's some extra picks or another forward prospect that maybe is a couple years out. You have to think they would be asking for Pettersson or whatever and working their way down, but that's probably why a deal wouldn't get made. But we'll see how that all shakes out. I feel that while we're still in Vancouver land, we might as well go over their signings. They decided that now that Henrik and Daniel are moving on, they need leadership, and they need some grit. They got all these young players, and so answering the call is Jay Beagle, Stanley Cup champion,
game changer,
coming in at what are they paying him? 4 years, $3 million a year.
Yeah,
could be worse. I would be. It's not a bad deal. I don't think 4 years might be a little long, a little longer than people might have wanted to go.
He's almost 33.
But again, he's great face-off guy, great defensively, play the PK all game if you want. And then maybe his new line mate, Antoine Roussel, coming in from Dallas, also UFA, another 4 years. and another $3 million apiece. So they got matching deals, if I'm reading that correctly. And then we re-signed Sven Baertschi at 3 years, $3.6 million. So he got a little more.
Amazing deal.
Yeah, he got a little more than those guys. And if he continues to develop, that's going to look great. If he ends up being a middle six winger, I can totally live with that. 3.6 mil. If he's hitting like 40 points, even, I'm happy. Like.
Oh, I think he's going to hit more than 40.
Well, I'm saying
if he. The only thing is his health.
I'm kind of looking at it and being like, how could this deal look bad? You know, if we're paying him over $3.5 million a year and he's not hitting 40 points, like then that's not good. That's looking rough. But I feel like I can't see him hitting 60 though. I feel like 50 plus is kind of his ceiling. When he was drafted, you know, probably thought more highly of him, and he's been there for a little time, but who knows? He could end up being that third piece to a line that just sort of takes off. If you remember last year. If you remember last year, the Stamkos Kucherov and Vladdy Nemestikov line, that top line was just almost 2 points per game each. Like, it was just ridiculous start to the season for the first couple months, and they did start to cool off a little bit, but he was that third guy on the line, and you know, he ends up getting traded, also ended up re-signing with the Rangers today, so good for him. Congrats on not going to Russia. Let's see Nemestikov's points for last year. So even with playing with two of the best players in the league, right? Like this is kind of, I'm just trying to give some perspective, right? So that line was on fire, and for like at least a couple months, and they ended up, you know, in the top of the scoring for the year. And when it's all said and done, Vladislav Nemestikov, 81 games, 48 points. So he barely hit 50. You know, I think you could probably round that up and call that a 50-point pace, but
44 in 62.
So to think about, it was 44 points in 62 games with Tampa. Is that right?
Yeah.
So, you know, oh wow. So with the Rangers, he only had 4 points in 19 games. Sign of things to come. Yeah. We'll see.
Doesn't look good. But okay, so the thing is, Baertschi.
Tell me about
29 points in 53 games.
Which is, what's the pace? Over a full season? 44 points. Let's call it 49 if we round up. So
and that's with him dealing with nagging injuries. It could have potentially been more. He could. I think he can hit 60 points.
Welcome back to the Sven Baertschi podcast. This is a deep dive on all things Swiss hockey players today and every day. Sven Baertschi. I hope he surprises me. I hope if he's a consistent 50-point guy, I'd be happy, you know, but I just don't see 60 points from him, you know, because a lot of times with these, that's kind of why I brought up the Stamkos and Kucherov thing, is when you're looking at who's playing with these strong players that will help them reach their full potential, you know, not that they're getting carried, you know, a la Jonathan Chichu, you know, in the old days.
All he wanted was a rocket Richard, and then he retired.
And then I'm out. But yeah, you do need good players to bring out the most of your potential as well. And he's definitely in a good position to do that. And if you look at it, the only way he's not getting those minutes and kind of keeping up the chemistry that he built last year is if someone else comes in and takes that spot. And if so, that means that's a good thing for the team, because it just means he goes down the line and, you know, ends up giving his offensive abilities to other line mates. So I feel like it's a good deal. Like, if I heard the deal was like over $4 million plus, wouldn't have shocked me. So the fact that it's under $4 million, I wouldn't have loved it, but the fact that it's under $4 million definitely is a good thing. So that's Vancouver. You know, they've definitely committed to playing the young guys and more or less seeing what they got. And the fans got to love it, because as of this point, none of these young players have disappointed us yet. So we can dream. You know, Quinn Hughes is still a 5-time Norris Trophy winner. Elias Pettersson is still, you know, MVP. Joe Thornton, 2.0, right? Or Henrik Sedin. Why not? Let's go with the Swedish guy from the team that he was playing on. Let's compare him to that.
Yeah, that would make sense.
Yeah, Bo Horvat and Besser, they're going to be lights out. So again, those guys, we definitely know a little more of what we're getting out of them, but it's the younger guys that'll be exciting to see how things pan out. So that's Vancouver. They're still in the West, so they're not going to win a lot of games, but that's okay because by the time things start to improve, our goaltenders are right on schedule, with Demko and maybe even it's Michael DiPietro, the other pick goaltender they took last year, who's supposed to be really solid. The two of them could end up be fighting for the starter's position in 2 years' time with Quinn Hughes holding it down in front of them. So Vancouver has a lot to be excited about. At least there's an excuse for them to lose games now, because it's like, well, they're losing games, but all these guys are getting the experience that they need, and it's only good things from here. But moving on, what are some of the other signings that stood out to you?
St. Louis. I think secretly St. Louis was one of the winners today.
Mm-hmm. What did they do? They
got back David Perron.
Okay.
For $4 million a season for 4 years. And then they got Bozak for $5 million a year for 3 years.
Okay.
I don't know. I think that they're just that weird team. Like they have, if you look at their team on paper, it's pretty solid. Like there's no real, like you can't look at their team and say, hey, this guy's bad or this guy's bad. They might be a little bit on the softer side. But I don't know. Like, okay, so now they have Braden Shen, who's been doing amazing. They have Tyler Bozak. So they have Braden Shen as their 1C. They have Tyler Bozak as their 2C. And then Sobotka and then Sundqvist. And they're 3-4. That's not bad.
Not bad.
And then the only problem I would say they have is their age is a little weird. The age of their team.
They have young guys and old guys, or what?
Yeah, it's like really, like they have super old guys and they have some guys that are really young, but they're amazing. So like Jaden Schwartz being one of them, obviously.
Sure. And they have a lot of help on their way up in the prospect system.
Yeah.
I know that last year Robbie Fabry was injured for most of the year. If he can get back to kind of where he was at and back on his development path, then he's a solid player, solid winger, left winger, and he should bring a lot to the team. And then as far as younger players, they have Tage Thompson, Robert Thomas is a big one that you'll see on a lot of these kind of prospect lists of players kind of on the cusp of making the jump. When you sign someone like Tyler, and he is a center. And he's a center, so it'll be interesting to see when he does make that jump. But when you sign someone like Tyler Bozak, it definitely pushes things back a little bit on the path of like when they need him to really step up. It just makes it more competition for him to get a shot in the top six.
People to learn from. Like worst case scenario, he ends up just being on the fourth line or like wing on one of the positions, and then he can just kind of learn off.
Yeah.
And then really good.
And then in the case of injuries, the depth is always going to come into play. And then they have that other they have Klim Kostin, who's another sort of mercurial Russian player that is sort of I think he was the 31st pick in the draft of that draft year, so he's just I think he was the last pick of the first round, and huge player, really great shot, fast, strong, playing in the AHL. It was a little weird, actually. I noticed I did draft him in fantasy last year, and so I've just kind of kept a bit more tabs on the players that I have drafted. So when it comes to St. Louis, it got a little funky because they actually didn't have their own AHL affiliate team to themselves last year. They were sharing it, I believe, with Colorado. It was a San Antonio Rampage. And so what that means is they were kind of like there was more prospects being fed into that team than the team could really handle. And so, when I was reading up on it, I was like, oh, why isn't he like he's barely getting any minutes. Like, he's not getting that many points. Like, what's up with this guy? And it turns out that he was just kind of lower on the totem pole as far as getting opportunities. And towards the second half, he definitely started getting more used to the American-sized ice and getting more comfortable and putting up some points. And actually, he actually got in a fight with another St. Louis Blues prospect in the AHL. I think it was like Wade Megan or something like that. And and I remember reading a thing where it's like, oh, this is the last thing you want is to have your own players like concussing each other or like knocking each other out. So I'm curious. Yeah, I wonder how often that happens. I'm sure when they're playing on the same minor league teams, it's probably less likely. But anyway, there's when you dig into kind of what's going on behind the scenes with a lot of these prospects, it can kind of shed light onto why they're either, their numbers are down, whether they're playing on a deep, like stacked Russian team, and you're wondering like, oh, you look at the stats and you're like, oh, like 12 points in 40 games, like that doesn't sound very good. But then you look into the team and you see all the other contributing factors. So it's always good to dig a little deeper and see what's going on there. But so St. Louis definitely improved. If you look at where they were at the start of last year, Perron was taken in expansion, and they kind of had Stastny there. So, looking at it now, Bozak ends up taking over for Stastny, which, is it an upgrade? It's maybe a hair, but I think he's a bit younger. Oh yeah, so it looks like Bozak is 32 years old, and Paul Stastny is also right around there. Okay, so they're about the same age. So I think leading up to free agency, it looked like Winnipeg was making room for Stastny by shipping out. They shipped out Steve Mason, and they shipped out Joel Armia and another prospect or a draft pick to Montreal for a defensive prospect for Montreal. And, it looked a lot like a cap dump. Winnipeg was just looking to free up money so they would be able to re-sign Stastny, and it didn't end up panning out. Stastny ended up making his way to Vegas. Who knows? Maybe they offered more money or more years, longer term. But yeah, Stastny, I think, is a good pickup for them. Helps give them a little more veteran presence. They'll probably still keep that top line together. That was so great for them last year, and we'll see how the young guys end up doing on Vegas. Some of their draft picks from the last years, most of them are centers. That was Cody Glass, Nick Suzuki. Those are the 2 first rounders from last year that they're excited about, and we might not be done with all the moves this summer. There could be some more trades on the way. Once we kind of see how the UFA landscape ends up, we see where all the chips fall, then it's sort of a position, especially after development camps, teams will kind of see what they need to shore up. Maybe they'll be signing some players from European leagues. So hard to say.
Let me ask you.
Tell me.
Vegas. Make the playoffs or don't make the playoffs?
They make the playoffs. I think Vegas makes the playoffs. What are the big changes? They brought in Stastny. That has to help. I think during their cup run they had Eric Holla was their second line center, and he did well. He definitely this year, I think it was 56-ish points.
Yeah, 55.
Yeah, so Eric Holla, 55 points in 76 games. He did his part. He also is listed as a left winger as well, so he has some positional flexibility. It'll be interesting to see how everything else kind of shakes out there. I feel like Fleury, maybe he's not going to win a Vezina or anything like that. Even if he regresses a bit, I see them making it.
I'm going to make a bold prediction.
Sure, what's that?
I don't think they're going to make it.
Okay. So you're kind of falling into the trends of last year of betting against this team, right? What do you think?
Well, I think everyone's betting for this team right now.
That's true. And if I were a betting man, I'd bet on your prediction, not mine. But that's I could see them missing, but maybe I'm just rooting for them. Maybe I got a soft spot.
I want them to make it. 100%. I would love to see Vegas make it again. I just think they're too thin, if that makes sense. I just think they're like one injury. It feels like anyways, they're one injury away from not being as successful. Like David Perron had 66 points. They lost that. They lost James Neal, who was a clutch scorer. James Neal is a clutch scorer.
He's underrated. I think he doesn't get
underrated.
I don't think he gets the same amount of praises he deserves. I know that Don Cherry is always rooting for him every hockey night in Canada.
He plays like playoff hockey. Like the thing about it like this. He's a goal scorer, a good goal scorer, but he plays like very playoff hockey, like gritty, kind of borderline dirty playoff hockey. And he's a goal scorer. I don't know. I just don't think you get very many people like that. It reminds me a lot of the goal scoring ability reminds me a lot of Justin Williams.
Okay. He does what it takes.
Yeah. Yeah, and he scores at really crucial times. And I remember with Nashville, he did the same thing. With Pittsburgh, he did the same thing. And Vegas in this cup run that just happened, again, same thing. Like he was just scoring when it mattered.
I could see Vegas sneaking into the playoffs, but yeah, I could see them narrowly missing it too. Well, I don't think they're going to be as dominant as last year, but we'll see what happens. But that's definitely interesting. When it comes down to players that those goal scorers are hard to come by, and if you do find them, what do? You give them a 5-year deal at $7 million a year, and you print a JVR on the back of that jersey. So that's what Philly decided to do. So Philly signs James Van Riemsdyk for 5 years at $7 million a year, bringing the kid home, bringing him back, home-ish, back to where it all started. When I was reading up on this, it seemed that the writing was on the wall that this means Wayne Simmons might be on the move. He might be off to another team. So
what? Really?
Yeah. I know that he was dealing with an insane amount of injuries last year and still managed to put up 25-ish goals, 26 goals despite. Did you ever read up on the Wayne Simmons injury list? Do you hear about this?
No, tell me. Oh, I think you mentioned something, but tell everyone.
It looks like this year he played through a broken ankle, a torn pelvis. I don't know how you do that. And a pulled groin, and he tore a ligament in his thumb, and and that was all this year, and still managed to score 24 goals. And
he also lost 6 teeth.
Yeah, and he lost 6 teeth, and he only missed 7 games. So if that's what he can do under those conditions, it'll be exciting. As long as he comes back to normal, then I'm excited to see what he can do. But
I can't imagine they want to get rid of him. Wow, that's crazy, because he's like one of the better power forwards in the league. And come playoff time, if they make it there this year with Van Riemsdyk,
we'll see. You gotta think that the Flyers want to keep him. But anytime a player has that kind of injury concerns, you can understand a team being hesitant to commit long term or to kind of figure something out. So. Mm-hmm. But yeah, Flyers, their young defense are only going to get better and better. They moved on from Peter Mrazek, who ended up landing in Carolina, correct?
Yep, that is correct.
On a 1 year. 1 year. So that's kind of on a show me contract. Definitely a motivated Peter Mrazek, and all he's got to do is be better than Scott Darling. So if you got to think it's good for both of them. Right, Scott Darling gets kind of the wake up call, or not the wake up call, but the tap on the shoulder of like, all right, man, let's pretend last year was an anomaly. Time to show us what you got. If not, we have someone maybe better than Cam Ward behind you now. I think he could be. Cam Ward.
Scott Darling's pretty solid.
Yeah, he had a bad year last year, statistically his worst year, and Ward ended up getting. Trying his hand in Chicago for $3 million for 1 year. I feel like that's definitely an upgrade on whatever backup Chicago ended up having from year to year or from game to game, including who is it? Scott Foster. Do you remember this guy?
Oh yeah, the guy who had to fill in last minute.
Yeah,
like
such
a
a good
1
story.
day contract or something.
Such a good story. Scott Foster, 36-year-old rec league goalie Scott Foster had to step in. He stepped in. I think he stopped like 8 shots, and this was against the Jets. And so I think he didn't even let in a goal. Which and he stopped some Patrick Laine shots and Dustin Byfuglien. So definitely like the coolest story for that guy for sure. Where were we? So that was Philly. Philly.
Mrazek.
The biggest news for Philly is JVR and moving on from Mrazek, and then they got their, looks like they're going to go with Elliott and Neuwirth, Michael Neuwirth and Brian Elliott are the two leads in Philly as of now.
But they're going to be both UFA coming up here, so they can maybe move on from both of them because neither one of them worked out.
Yeah, what's Detroit doing? What are they doing? They sign Jonathan Bernier, 3 years, $3 million as Jimmy Howard insurance is what that looks like. Jimmy Howard has been polarizing for them, but as the team has gotten worse, it doesn't help him out at all. And Bernier had some really good starts in Colorado, so maybe 1A, 1B situation is best for Detroit where they're pushing each other. And they brought back Thomas Vanek at 1 year for $3 million.
The legend returns.
The legend returns, and maybe they can get draft picks out of him at the deadline, and maybe we see a line of Zetterberg, Vanek, and Zadina. I mean, who better for Zadina to learn from than one of the best goal scorers of his generation? I mean, Vanek is not what he used to be, but he
still got that touch though.
Oh yeah,
it's amazing.
Yeah, and with being more of a power play specialist now, I think it can only help a guy like Zadina. So exciting times in Detroit, But they gotta sell tickets. They gotta put something on the ice. They gotta get some goals and stop some goals. So I think that those answer both of those questions.
Their D-core is as bad as Toronto's.
They're giving it a run for its money. I mean, I would say worse.
It's definitely worse. I'm just trolling.
Yeah, I would say because Detroit doesn't have a Morgan Riley.
They don't
barely
have
a Jake Gardner. Yeah, I mean Trevor Daley is.
They have 3 Ron Hainesies.
Rooting for you, Detroit, but you're making it hard for me. Making it hard for us.
Yeah, I like Detroit. But
yeah, what else? The other signing that caught my eye was Michael Grabner going to Arizona for 3 years at $3.3 million, which is a decent deal, I think, especially with so many young players in Arizona. It'll be good to have a veteran that is just one of the best penalty killers, goal scorers. Just like, I feel like he's a guy that doesn't really need anyone else to help him do what he does. And I think that's why he's been such an attractive player as far as getting traded and bouncing around. Like, is this his 6th team?
Yeah, it's a lot of teams.
He was, again, first round pick from Vancouver back in 2010. Then he had a good run with the Islanders. Or actually, he was traded to
Florida.
He was in Florida. Yeah, I don't see him on his...
Yeah, because he never played. They didn't even want him.
They waived him or something.
Yeah, they were
that.
like, we don't want this guy. And then the Islanders ended up picking him up.
Sure. And then he had a really good
52 points.
Great run.
Everyone felt so stupid for letting him go when he had that season.
That's interesting. So that was his best season.
Yeah.
34 goals that year. I remember when in fantasy when people were really excited about him because they're like, man, 32 goals, 52 points. In his first full year, like, feel bad for Vancouver, but hey, what are you going to do, right? But he's definitely carved out a nice career for himself. Yeah, so Vancouver, long run on the island, then Toronto, then the Rangers, then New Jersey, and now he's taken his talents to the desert. So I feel like he's going to be a good fit in Arizona, and
he seems to be able to score 20 goals pretty. I don't want to say consistently, but like because he went through some injury trouble, but he seems to be able to just score 20 on his own.
He's had a good run, but yeah, there's plenty of signings. I think those are kind of the big ones. I don't think we've missed. I mean, like we mentioned briefly, Nichushkin is headed back to Dallas.
The return.
Yeah, he never left a huge impression for me or for a lot of people. he kind of left people wanting more, and maybe this is when it happens. Maybe Evgeny Dadonov his way back from the KHL to kind of make a difference in Dallas. So that could be interesting. I read a thing about Doughty. Number 8 signs for 8 years for $88 million. That has a nice ring to it.
Yeah.
But what I also read was that, which really caught my eye, is that he negotiated the deal himself.
I heard about that. Yes.
And because
he apparently also talked to Brodeur about it.
He did, huh?
Yeah, because apparently Brodeur negotiated his own contract in New Jersey.
Okay.
And then he was like, "Oh, what advice can you give me?" And so they had a little chatty about it.
It was somewhere around almost $2 million he ended up being able to keep to himself for negotiating his own contract. And the quote from Rob Blake, they asked him if Rob Blake had ever negotiated directly with a player like Doughty had. And he said no, but he said Doughty did a good job. He said, quote, "He did a good job." So maybe that's it. But that's crazy, right? You negotiate your own contract, and I feel like you wonder why more players don't do it. I'm sure there's a few bad stories floating around of someone that maybe left money on the table. But when it's a team you played for your whole career and you're staying, I feel like that would make it a lot easier. They want to go easy on you, and I'm sure for them it's probably a quicker negotiation. They have an idea.
You don't want to.
Yeah,
nowadays.
They have an idea of their value, and I remember quotes from him saying that he saw himself making more money than Subban, and kind of him and Erik Karlsson would be in the same range. So, and it looks like the Kings agreed. And if they hadn't, they would have this looming over them all season. So it definitely benefits them to get it done now, and then they can focus on whatever else, even if whether they do or do not make the playoffs. So
yeah, but the thing too is nowadays, this whole no movement clause and stuff like that, it's they might give you it, but it's not necessarily people are just going to be like, "I want out," right? So let's say you give a Doughty a contract and you kind of screw him because he doesn't know some little loophole or something. He's not going to want to play there. He's going to be like, "No, you screwed me over. Get out of here." And then he's going to just request a trade out of the city.
It's definitely taking a risk.
Yeah, it's not worth it. It's not worth it.
Yeah. And for him, right, he's looking at the team and thinking, I guess he already lives here, and having to move, start somewhere fresh. A lot of Leafs fans were kind of crossing their fingers, hoping he would become a UFA.
Yeah,
and
they want JT and Doughty. Okay,
I mean,
cool.
Maybe this was before they knew that Tavares was a sure thing, but you got to hope. You got to hold out hope.
Yeah, of course.
What's interesting, but regarding where Tavares was signing, looking at the teams he was going to be joining, whether it was San Jose or whether it was Toronto, this one tweet stood out to me. Going into this season, San Jose has Joe Pavelski, who's 34 years old. Brent Burns is 33. Logan Couture is 29. Joe Thornton's 39. Vlasic's 31. And I think Martin Jones is under 30, and, they got Hurdle and they got some other players, but for the sake of argument, take a look at the Leafs. Mitch Marner, 21. Austin Matthews, 21. Nylander, 22. Kadri, 27. And Morgan Riley, 24. So
you can't.
When you start to look at that stuff of your core and who you're going to be playing with for 8 years, and is it really worth that extra couple million a year to where you kind of that it's going to be tougher to win there? If that's the case, just stay with the Islanders, right? They have their own issues, but I don't know. It was interesting. It stood out to me.
I kind of and I agree with you. I think if JT's going to sign places, I mean, he signed in Toronto, but if it was between Islanders and the Sharks, I personally, I think would have gone with the Islanders from a team perspective. Not how nice San Jose is and stuff, but just like you just said, they're all really old. You have 3 years of solid play from them, maybe.
And the Islanders are they're definitely on the up. They have some exciting young players and good draft picks, and they're a goalie away from making some noise. So we'll see. It'll be interesting. You might look at the Islanders a couple years from now and see what they can do with that cap space.
Yeah.
And maybe they would have regretted signing. I mean, it's hard to say that they would regret signing someone like John Tavares, but definitely that money freed up gives them some options as well. So I'm curious to see how it rolls out. The other news, the Hall of Fame inductees were announced. And there's some real good ones. We got Marty St. Louis, just a legend, just that tiny little guy, just fitness freak. Just insane guy, joined by another Marty. That's Marty Brodeur. Can't argue with that. Really setting it all up. Goalie of the century.
Working to this name, huh?
Sure. Well, then you get into the builders. There's like these Hall of Fame, the builder category. So people that contributed to the game, and then we got Willie O'Ree, who's the first black hockey player to play in the NHL. So definitely part of history. I believe that Willie O'Ree was actually blind in one eye. Did you know about this?
No.
Yeah, he didn't tell the team that he was blind in the one eye because he thought that it was they would cut him because of it. And so that's definitely one of my favorite Willie O'Ree stories. I mean, it's sad, but also it's pretty cool that he made it happen. He still stuck it out. And then of course, what Hall of Fame inductee list is complete without Gary Bettman. So it's really good when you kind of acknowledge greatness while greatness is still being bestowed upon you, right? It's sort of like a lifetime achievement award to someone who's still going. They're like, wait a second, like now what? And as much hate as Gary Bettman gets, basically scheduling lockouts as being his favorite negotiating tactic. That's probably the biggest thing that people give him shit builder. Over. Yep. He's going down in history, Yeah. He's in the hall. And I will say, when I was reading up on this, he has nothing to do with it. It sure looks like he's like, you know what? It's my time. Let me in, boys.
I would love if that was the case. In my mind, I'm imagining a boardroom, and he sits down and he's like, you know what? I feel like I've done a great job. I really want to be in the Hall of Fame. And everyone just kind of looks around to the left and right.
You sure,
Gary? Not really the way it works.
You sure about that?
Yeah. And what if he messes up? What if he does something ridiculous and then he ends up like being more of a disaster than doing anything useful? Then what?
I mean, you can't uninduct. You can't unduct
exactly. What do you
anyone
do
from the Hall of Fame? Definitely, he built the game. He helped out with expansion. For better or worse. I think it's working out. He's definitely holding his ground. He's stubborn is a word that comes up a lot when describing him. As far as sticking it out with Arizona, but no Gary Bettman, no Vegas, probably, right? Yeah. No Seattle. Fingers crossed that it actually gets announced and comes through, and he's really sticking to his guns for those Southern teams. So it's a lot, and there's actually he's getting flack for not acknowledging a connection, a link between concussions and hockey. He's
doing a great job.
So that's kind of when you Google Gary Bettman under news, what comes up for me right away is, will Gary Bettman's legacy be ignoring head injuries? So he's already leaving his mark, and we'll see. We'll see. I mean, he gets booed all the time, right? If you watch any of these, I know you mentioned you didn't get to watch the draft, but aside from the highlights, but did you see how he was getting booed? Every draft year, Gary Bettman gets booed.
Pretty much, yeah. Everywhere he goes.
And I guess because he's basically the CEO of the NHL, right? He reports to the owners, yes. And he definitely takes the opportunity to be the face, to be the guy that like is like, hey, listen, I'm the guy, take it from me, right? And I think you could see that any of these decisions are coming from one person is a good thing, but couldn't you let someone else go up there, right? Like, it's always got to be you handing the cup off. It's got to be like,
to be in the spotlight.
It's got to be you. You're the guy. Like I guess if there's different people, like let's say he had assistants or other people who could be taking on some of these responsibilities, maybe some of this blame and some of the criticism, maybe that could be kind of dissipated. But I guess when you're the guy, any of the praise is on you, and also you take all the heat. Yeah, this is true. But he could be a little bit more out of the spotlight, and it would still work out just fine. I'd think so. I'd like to think so.
You know, he just wants to be the man.
Yeah, man. So and since we last talked, it looks like the last coaching position got filled, which is in Washington, in DC. Mm-hmm. That's I think it's Todd Reardon, who was kind of responsible for Washington's defense during their whole cup run. So they promoted from within. So even on the coaching side of things, they're keeping the band together. So it keeps some consistency.
Not too much change.
Yeah, he's seen how everything's run, and who knows, maybe he'll have some interesting things to bring to the table. But I mean, it's kind of a high bar, you know, coming off of winning a
Win
cup.
the cup again, or you're fired.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably not so clear, you know, but if they miss the playoffs, he's done for sure. Yeah. Like that's the thing. If they miss if they get knocked out in the first round, he's probably also done. Second round, there's a lot of history there, so maybe that also does it. All I'm saying is he's got some pressure.
Yeah, just a little. But I'm sure he's going to do great. Like, he kind of set them up, you know, to be that way. Like, it wasn't obviously just Barry Trotz. It's like a team effort from the coaching staff. So there isn't too much change. You know, there's going to be that same kind of deployment, if that's a word.
Deployment.
Yeah, from him. Basically, that same roster is going to get on the ice and do the exact same thing they did, and just hopefully they get the same bounces, and that gets them to a cup.
We shall see.
Yeah,
we shall see.
Pittsburgh just got Jack Johnson. So that's one solid defenseman they just added. So it might be a little hard. Pittsburgh might want to regain the number one spot in the East.
Are you telling me that Pittsburgh is one Jack Johnson away from another cup? From their third cup in 4 years?
I mean, I don't know. They have pretty much the same roster. I don't see why not. That window's closing for Malkin and Crosby, so this is kind of it. Like, they have to start gunning it here.
At a point, you kind of you got to go with what you got, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And when you're that good that long, you're not going to have a deep prospect bench to pull from. But yeah, if you got a healthy Chris Letang, Justin Schultz, Ole Mata, Brian Dumoulin played actually pretty great this playoffs. Jamie Alexiak, he did okay. Chad Ruhwedel did okay, and then Jack Johnson. You know, it's some depth. They got something. A team, a top power play with Crosby, Malkin, Kessel, Hornquist, and Letang. I mean, you can't ignore that. They did. That's one of the trades that slipped in before the free agency was Connor Sherry ended up going to Buffalo. So that's one guy who played a lot with Crosby and saw some success. You know, can play with a high end, high skill player. So that bodes well for him landing on Eichel's wing. We'll see. We'll see how that shakes out. And Jake Gensel probably continues to just be paired right on Crosby's wing,
just feeding him the puck every time. It's great.
Doing it all. So that's kind of it for this week. Definitely a lot of this is a big one. This is a lot to get through. There's a lot of names we didn't even talk about. We didn't talk about Komarov. We didn't talk about Hutton. What is it? Carter Hutton, not Ben Hutton. Carter Hutton. We didn't talk about Eric Fair, Jimmy Hayes. Ryan Reeves, Stephon Elliott. We didn't talk about the Senators buying out Alex Burrows after acquiring him just a year ago with one of their high-end draft prospects. We didn't talk about that. And that's okay, because, that's there's going to be other things to talk about next week, and if not, then we'll go all into that. So, as always, thanks for sticking around this week and making it this far with us. You can follow us on all the things. Some of them are good, some of them are worthwhile. You can find us on YouTube at Hockey Pals. You can find us on Twitter at Hockey Pals Pod. And you can find us on iTunes. Feel free to subscribe and give us a review. I know there's a lot to review. 2 whole episodes. I know it's a lot. We're so generous with all of our givings. And yeah, I'm gonna head back to the sunny LA lifestyle to welcome LeBron James to the Lakers, which is the news. Yeah. However much Tavares makes at $11 million a year, LeBron is making $38.5 million a year. So we still got some ways to work our way up to NBA levels, Gary Bettman. And if you can get us there, then you'll always be a builder in my book. So we'll see you next week. And anything else? What do you got?
No, that's it. Thank you for tuning in, and see you next week.
That's it. We'll see you next week. Signing off from all the places. Later.
See ya.